All right, let's dive right into this. Today, we're taking a deep look at Plautus's Menaechmi, which is absolutely a cornerstone of ancient classical literature, written right around 200 BC. If you've ever laughed at a story about mistaken identity, well, you have this exact play to thank. It takes this brilliant idea of identical twins and uses it to completely deconstruct human identity, ownership, and even the social order itself. We're going to explore exactly how one single physical trait can push an entire society to its absolute breaking point.
Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll hit the introduction and thematic thesis, then look at the historical and cultural context, move into literary composition and style, unpack the ethical and philosophical framework, examine the character arcs and dialectics, and finally, finish up with the text's transmission and enduring legacy.
Starting off with Section 1, Introduction and Thematic Thesis. Now, to really grasp the primary textual critique here, it helps to first look at something called the acrostic argument. Traditionally attributed to Priscian the grammarian, this is a pretty neat bibliographic feature that precedes the play in the Delphi classical convention. It basically functions as a concise verse summary where the first letters of each line actually spell out the play's title. For Renaissance scholars, this was a highly efficient tool, almost a cheat sheet, utilized to quickly grasp a really complex plot before diving into intense line-by-line study.
So what exactly is the doubling motif? Think of it as a relentless narrative engine fueled entirely by two indistinguishable twin brothers, Menaechmi of Epidamnus and Menaechmi of Syracuse, who, by the way, was formerly known as Sosicles. The absolute absurdity mathematically kicks off when the Syracuse twin docks in Epidamnus after spending 6 long years searching the Mediterranean for his lost brother. The catch? Nobody in the city knows the second twin exists. Not the local twin's wife, not his mistress, Erotium, and certainly not his favorite parasite, Paniculus. This triggers a recursive loop of total domestic chaos. Characters react to one brother based entirely on the financial and romantic interactions they just had with the other. I mean, one brother is unknowingly wreaking havoc on the other's life just by showing up. Plautus brilliantly uses this indistinguishable physical trait to dismantle the reliability of social contracts. Without distinct singular identity markers, civic authority, property ownership, and marital fidelity instantly disintegrate. The chaos literally only stops when these two localized identities finally collapse back into a single shared history.
Moving on to Section 2, Historical and Cultural Context. You'll see that the setting here is not just a backdrop, but an active, corrosive participant in the narrative conflict. To put this all into perspective, we need to place Plautus on the timeline. Born in northern Italy around 254 BC, his work marks a definitive shift in ancient theater. He decisively moves away from the highly specific political satire that defined Greek Old Comedy and pivots sharply toward the broader, generalized social archetypes native to the Middle Comedy era.
This brings us to a really stark geopolitical dichotomy baked right into the text itself. Epidamnus is a city of vice. It's meticulously characterized by the slave Menaechmi as a haven for heavy drinkers, conmen, and silver temptresses. It represents a corrupt, alluring space that constantly threatens to swallow the innocent twin whole. In stark contrast stands Syracuse, the historical origin of the twins' family. Plautus actually roots Syracuse in historical reality by listing its actual sequential rulers like Agathocles and Hero. Epidamnus functions as this dangerous agent that threatens to financially and morally absorb the Syracuse twin into its web of corruption. So, the ultimate escape of both twins back to Syracuse at the play's conclusion? It isn't just a happy family reunion, it's a necessary geographic salvation from the absolute moral erasure threatened by Epidamnus.
Section 3, Literary Composition and Style. Let's look at genre and structural architecture. The play is strictly categorized in antiquity as a fabula palliata, which is basically a Roman adaptation of Greek New Comedy. Structurally, the fabula palliata does something fascinating. It virtually eliminates the traditional Greek chorus. And this matters immensely, because by removing the chorus's influence on the plot, the narrative suddenly speeds up. It becomes hyper-focused, entirely on messy Roman domestic drama and specific social sensibilities. And Menaechmi just gives us this absolute masterclass in middle comedy stock archetypes. We've got the adolescens, or young man, Menaechmi as the classic clever slave, the servus callidus, Erotium as the transactional courtesan, the meretrix, Paniculus as the gluttonous parasitus, and the wife as the financially leveraged matrona. Plautus leans so heavily into dramatic irony here. We, the audience, know all about the identical twins, but the characters on stage succumb to complete and utter bewilderment.
You see, the fabula palliata relies on these rigid, predictable characters reacting to highly unpredictable situations. The comedy arises from the collision of fixed social roles, like the jealous wife demanding her stolen cloak, or the greedy parasite seeking revenge for a missed feast, crashing headfirst into the destabilizing force of the twins. It reveals just how automated societal behaviors become when put under the extreme pressure of mistaken identity. Let's dive into Section 4, Ethical and Philosophical Framework. Specifically, we'll look at the vices and societal values at play. Take a look at this fantastic quote from the Parasite Peniculus. It perfectly captures the cynical reality of Plautus's world. His claim that a captive is best secured by food and drink shows us that loyalty in this society isn't driven by morals or ethics. It is quite literally driven by the stomach. It's an entire system built on all we might call caloric loyalty. The comedy really sings because it exposes just how fragile these patron-client and marital obligations actually are. Every single person is out for themselves. Erotheum, the meretrix, is the pivot point for all the financial mess, using her transactional nature to extract stolen property from the young man. Then you have Peniculus, who betrays his patron to the wife entirely because he missed out on a single meal, proving his loyalty is instantly voided by hunger. We also see the wife weaponize her dowry to maintain domestic power, only to be told off by her own father for trying to subjugate a wealthy husband. Meanwhile, the slave Menaechmi's entire existence is completely dedicated to the desperate pursuit of his own freedom. Plautus portrays a society held together not by virtue, but by fragile, selfish economic exchanges that are easily ruptured by the mere presence of a look-alike. Moving into Section 5, Character Arcs and Dialectics. Let's examine the inverse trajectories and internal conflicts of our main characters. The two brothers experience these completely inverse psychological trajectories. As the local social order collapses, the epidemnus twin watches his life completely fall apart. He gets locked out of his own house, alienated by everyone he knows, and is literally diagnosed as insane by a summoned doctor. Conversely, his brother from Syracuse is just stumbling into free meals, unearned wealth, and sudden romance, all while recognizing the absolute madness surrounding him. It all builds up to the anagnorisis, that grand recognition scene. It's essentially a rigorous logic puzzle solved by our clever slave Menaechmi. When the two brothers finally stand in the same room, Menaechmi walks through a step-by-step deconstruction of their past. First, he points out the obvious. They look like identical mirror images. Then they cross-reference their father, the merchant Moschus. Next, they confirm they both natively hailed from Syracuse. Finally, they reconcile the timeline, realizing the younger twin's name was changed from Sophocles to Menaechmi by their grandfather. This progression logically collapses the chaotic duality back into a unified family history. It decisively proves that careful observation and historical fact-checking are the only antidotes to the total social collapse triggered by identical physical forms. Finally, Section 6, Transmission and Enduring Legacy. Let's look at the architectural lineage of this comedic blueprint. The architectural lineage of Menaechmi is honestly staggering. William Shakespeare utilized this exact Plantine narrative engine as the foundational source for the Comedy of Errors, and he deliberately intensified the doubling motif by adding a second set of identical twin slaves, the Dramios. Later on, Carlo Goldoni localized these precise mechanics within the Italian commedia dell'arte tradition in his play, The Two Venetian Twins. This text stands historically as the absolute progenitor of farce, cementing the durable framework of destabilized identity in Western literature. So what do we ultimately arrive at? Well, it's a structural mechanism of absolute precision. A single physical anomaly completely short-circuits the civic, domestic, and legal systems of an entire society. The text endures not merely as a funny comedy, but as a profound inquiry into how heavily our social order relies on superficial visual recognition. By tracking the chaos that ensues when physical uniqueness is erased, Plautus lays bare the transactional and precarious nature of human relationships. As we conclude this explainer of the Fabula Palliata, we're left to ponder the profound philosophical implications of mistaken identity, embedded deeply within the text. How does the destabilization of a single physical trait irrevocably expose the fragile constructs of our social and legal realities?